Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello dear learners, welcome to the session of Managing Equality and Diversity. I am Dr. Supriya Jain, working as an Associate Professor at GLU University, Mathura. In this session, we will be having our understanding on the topic learning. So let us look at the topics, what all are we going to cover here in this session. We will be discussing the basic meaning of the learning. Thereafter, we will get to know about the principles of learning, what are the principles, we will focus on that. There are different factors which affects the learning, and finally we will have our understanding on theories. So there are relatively various theories given how we can make it possible and how we can make learning better in the organization. So let's begin with the understanding of what learning refers to. Learning is something which keeps on going. Okay, so we need to understand with this word that learning is something which is relatively a permanent change in the behavior of an individual that occurs as a result of an experience. So why it is important for us to have this discussion about learning, because we are talking about having a desired behavior in the organization, and through the process of learning we can really bring a relatively change in their nature, or it can help you to have a permanent change in their behavior that occurs as a result of their experiences, whatever the information, whatever the things they would be learning throughout the organization, we would be able to see that in their behavior. So we can infer that learning has taken place if an individual's behave, react, respond as a result of experience in the manner different from the way he formerly behaved. Right. So you can understand whether the learning has taken place or not, that can be reflected through the behavior, through the attitude, through the actions of an individual, and this is very, very important in the organization to understand that learning should happen, right? Because whatever the way we are trying to make people learn, are they really learning, or is that bringing some change in their behavior or not, that is need to be studied. So if you look at the definition given for learning, these are the definitions which are given by, one is given by N.L. Munn. He says that learning is defined as a process of having one's behavior modified. So it is important that learning only happens when a person brings that change to their behavior, right? More or less, it is a permanent, change, right? So if there is a temporary change taking place, that means learning does not happen, and maybe because of some reason this person or the individual is showing that particular change in their nature. But if it has been taken place, then definitely the behavior will change for permanent. By that he does and consequences of his action, or by that he observe, right? So learning can be done by his observations also, by the consequences of the action which the person is showing, help us understand the learning has taken place. So learning can be defined as relatively permanent change in the person's behavior, potentially the results of reinforced practices or experiences. So it is basically, you can say that if an organization wants to create a environment, if they really want to create a culture, how we want our employees to respond, how we want our employees to behave. So in that case, we have to create that environment of learning, where through the aspects of reinforcement, right, whether they could be positive or they could be negative, right. So some of the behavior we expect employees to repeat that behavior. So if we are associating some kind of a positive rewards to those actions, then we can see such behavior will be repeated again and again. But if there is any kind of negative behavior which we are seeing in the organization, then definitely we should make people learn as well that such kind of actions will not be accepted, and some kind of negative punishment or extinction should be given to that thing. Like for example, if an employee comes late to the organization, definitely such kind of actions are not being acceptable. If a person makes a habit of coming or regularly coming late to the organization, then we need to make them understand that these are things which are not acceptable. So this can be made learn by giving them certain punishment, maybe their salary would be deducted, or they would be given some kind of an understanding where they will learn that reaching to the organization on time is of utmost importance, right. And if any of your behavior you want the individual to be repeated again in terms if they are doing something good, or if they are meeting out these standards, or reaching out more than these standards, then some appreciation and award should be given to the employee, so that person would be motivated to do more than what is being required, and others will also be motivated to do that. So, these kind of learning examples we can set in the organization to change the behavior of the people working there. Now, let us look at the nature and the characteristics of learning. So, here you have already understood that the learning whatever we are talking about is a change process, because ultimately through the process of learning we are trying to bring a change in the behavior of the individual. If that change is not taking place, that means the learning does not happen. The another important aspect here is the permanent change. So, whatever the change are we looking forward for should be of permanent nature, right. If there will be a temporary change taking place, then the learning not has happened, right. So, rather we should understand that this change should be of permanent nature. Setting behavioral action is one of the important aspect of learning from the organizational point of view, like what kind of behavior we want to set, how we want people to behave, how we want them to produce their action or to show their actions on it, that is being done here. And then learning also needs a meaningful experiences. Learning will only happen when people will have some meaningful experiences to it, right. If they are not attached with any kind of an experience, then it is possible that learning might not take place. So, it is always important to reward with those kind of an action where you want them to learn to repeat such kind of an activities again in future. And if you want any such behavior should not be repeated, then you should also be attaching some kind of a negative or punishment to that particular action, so that they should make some meaningful experience out of it, that this should not be done in future again. Now, coming to the important aspect of this session, where we would be learning the principles, right. So, learning is something which also have certain principles to be taken care of, because it is not that easy to make anybody learn. The learning is a lifelong process, and it is to be done on a continuous basis till the end of the journey of any individual. Learning happens, right, some way or the other we are learning. But if you want that learning to be more efficient, the learning to be more effective, then certainly we should be following these principles, because these principles will help in learning better, and your things will become more effective and productive. So, here we have 7 principles in this regard, starting from readiness, exercise, effect, primacy, recency, intensity and freedom. So, now we will be discussing about all these points one by one. So, very first is the readiness. So, this readiness principle says that readiness from the side of the learner, not from the side of the person who is making them learn. Definitely both should be ready, but it is more from the perspective of a learner. The learner should be ready to learn, right. Learning cannot be taken place forcefully. If you want somebody to learn something forcefully, then you actually not be able to make them learn those things unless and until the person is ready from inside to learn, right. Definitely learner readiness is important, and the people who are making them learn should also be ready with the required aspects of the learning, that they have related content ready with them, or they are having the required methods and tools and technology to provide that sort of learning. So, readiness implies a degree of willingness and eagerness of an individual to learn, right. How much eager that individual is, how much eagerness is there in that individual to learn that particular aspect. So, learning becomes better when a person is physically, mentally and emotionally ready to learn, right. If a person is keeping their heart, mind and soul to that aspect of learning, then learning will happen faster and learning will remain permanent, right. So, they do not learn if they have no reason for learning. It is again very, very important, whenever we are trying to make people learn, we should always generate some kind of a reason. When people see that there is no reason for learning, nothing is going to happen, there will be no benefit or outcome of this learning, then generally they lose their interest and they do not listen those things carefully, and learning will not happen. So, readiness and preparedness from the individual's point of view becomes very crucial for learning process. The another important principle of learning is exercise, right. So, learning will remain in the mind of an individual when you exercise that learning, when you repeat that thing again and again, right. So, it is important for you, whatever you have heard for once, you might not be able to remember it for long unless and until you are not exercising it, you are not practicing it. So, here exercising means practicing. The more you will be practicing, the better the learning would be. So, the principle of exercise state that those things that are most often repeated, right, when they are being repeated are the ones that are best remembered. Okay. So, if learning will take place only once, or you have been told to those things only once, then you might not be able to remember it for long, but if it is to be done on a regular basis, if repeatedly those things are being told to you, then it will create an impact in your mind and you will be learning those things, and soon it will be reflected in your behavior, right. So, repetition and practice are the most important aspect to be taken care under the principle of learning. Another is the effect, right. So, effect is some association with that particular learning, right. What impact or what effect it is going to create on it, that is going to define whether that learning will be there or not. So, here we are attaching this effect with the satisfying or the pleasant feeling with that particular thing. Like the example which I have given you, if a person is coming late to the organization on regular basis, right. So, if there will be no impact or no effect of such particular thing, then the person might be doing such kind of things regularly in coming future. But if there will be an effect, right, if there will be some kind of a punishment would be given to the individual, then effect would be negative, and this kind of a learning will there in their mind that this behavior should not be repeated again. Any good thing they would be doing in the organization, then also some positive aspect you are attaching to the learning, then they also going to behave better. So, the principle of effect is that learning is strengthened when they are being accompanied by a pleasant or a satisfied feeling, and the learning is weakened when is associated with the unpleasant feeling, right. So, pleasant feeling or unpleasant feeling will also have a considerable impact on the learning. If you are giving some pleasant or satisfying aspects to the learning, then people will try to learn those things better. Another important aspect in this category refers to primacy, right. So, primacy is the state of being first, right. So, you will be able to relate with this principle with the understanding that whatever we learn for the very first time, we learn it better and we remember it forever, right. So, it is almost with the case of every individual that first thing creates a long lasting and strong impression in the mind of the individual, and they become difficult to change, and that is why we say that the habits and the behavior of an individuals are not that easy to be changed, right. Or people who reach out to the certain ages becomes difficult for them to understand and to change their learning, because they are whatever has been learned in their mind in primacy aspect, right, what they have learned initially will always remain in their mind. Okay. So, learned things first create a strong impression in the mind that is difficult to erase. Okay. So, definitely a right set of learning should be taken place in the initial ages or initial stage of the life, where people have learned understanding of making difference between what is right and what is wrong. If something wrong they have learned at their childhood, then definitely it is going to have a very strong impact in their personalities in their later ages of the life, right. And that is why we say for a child it is very, very important, right, to make them learn things right initially, right. Their parents plays a very important role, their school, their teachers plays a very important role to set the right example, because that primacy learning will have a long lasting impact on their personality. The another important principle in this line goes with recency. Recency means the recent thing we keep learning, we keep remembering better, right. So, it is not in the contrast with the principles principle which we have discussed just now. Primacy means the first learning which happens in the initial ages of our life, whereas recency refers to the recent thing, right, something which has happened in the past, or maybe 10 years back, or maybe 5 years back, or maybe 1 month ago, right? We don't remember actually what we have taken in the dinner. If somebody asks you, 1 month ago, or maybe 5 days ago, if it is not a very special day to you, right? So, what are the aspect of this recency refers to? We used to keep in our mind the recent things which are happening, okay. So, state of being recent are the most recent learned things are best remembered, and the information acquired most recently generally remembered best, right. So, for learning it is also important, if you want to learn new information, new kind of thing, then recent things are always keeping more impression in your mind as compared to the things which has happened in the past. Then comes the intensity. Intensity refers to the deepness of that particular learning, right. So, more intense things which are being taught in a practical way, right. So, generally what is being said, things will be remembered better, or things will be learned better when we are doing it actually, and that is why learning while doing will have more impact as compared to the learning which has been taken place in a close environment, right. So, it is difficult for people to relate with the things. So, intensity will become better if some practical association has been attached to that learning, and they will be able to have a long lasting impact in the mind of a learner, right. And for that reason only we make it clear that practical things need to be told, practical exposure needs to be given to the learner to make things learn better. And then freedom is also one of the important principle of learning, that freedom should be there, right, that they should be free to learn, and when there is no kind of a pressure on the learner, then learning will take in a better way, right. So, conversely, if audience is forced to learn something, if you are being asked that you have to learn this thing, then that kind of a pressure will be there in the mind of that individual, and that learning might not take place in the manner when a person himself or herself feel free to learn that particular thing. So, these are the few principles of learning which we need to understand if we want our learning to be effective, if we want right set of learning take place with the individual, then we should know that our person is always ready to learn, right. We should understand that more of exercise, more of practice will make things learn better. If the effect has been associated with learning and is pleasant and satisfying effects are being associated, then learning will become better, right. Primacy refers to the principle where the things which we have learned in the initial ages of our life remembers better, and it becomes difficult for us to change them, because somehow they become our values and beliefs as well, right. And then recency refers to the recent informations we are able to remember most as compared to the information which we have received in the past. Intensity refers to the deepness of any of the learning aspect. When you involve doing something, when you do it practically, then the impact of those things will be better, and definitely freedom allows learning to happen better, right. If a freedom is given to the learner, if they are given with the choice whether they want to learn or not, then learning, if choose by themselves, then learning will become better. Now, let us look at the factors, right. There are few factors also which affects the learning, and what are those factors? The very first in this regard goes the intelligence, right. So, IQ, intelligent question, we all have heard about it. So, level of intelligence of an individual will always have a considerable impact on learning. Definitely the people who are having more of IQ, they will be able to learn faster as compared to the people who are having lesser IQ, okay, because it is easier for them to relate with the thing, to connect with the thing. So, intelligence level of a of an individual creates a lot of impact on learning. Another is the goal, right. So, goals also affect your learning. What is your life goal? What is exactly you are looking forward for, right. If your life goal is towards that particular aspect, you would be more inclined to learn that particular thing, right. If actually you want to become a doctor, right, if your life goal is to be a doctor, then whatever the information related to get a medical education, you would be putting more emphasis on that particular aspect, and then your learning will become better. Like for example, you can take there was a girl who is more interested in learning, she has a very keen interest in learning badminton, right. She has inside she has that particular goal that she wants to be a very good badminton player, even though when she was not exposed to those particular sessions informally, but in school she was always interacting with the coach, she was always trying to read out the information, she was always practicing all those things, because her goal was to become a good badminton player. So whatever could possible for her to make that learning in this regard, she was able to make it. So our life goal also define what we actually want to learn and where we want to focus more on it. Same way we have some interest area, right? If you have some interest in that particular thing, you will automatically learn those things, even if somebody is supporting you, somebody is giving you the guidance in this regard or not, but your interest area will define the learning in that particular aspect, right? So interest of the individual also creates a lot of change or impact in the process of learning. When we have certain interest in the area, we will learn it better. If we don't have that interest in the area, then we don't learn it, right? So it is the kind of a principle which we talked about, freedom. So freedom comes when we have some interest in doing such things, okay? Again, the another important point is motivation, right? If a person is motivated enough to learn certain things, they know with the learning of such things they would be upgrading themselves and it will be helpful for them in future, then they would be motivated enough to learn it. How this learning would be fruitful for them? So it is important from the organization's perspective, whenever they are planning for some training program where they want their employees to learn certain things, to upgrade themselves, to have a better knowledge, to have a better understanding of those things, then they should also be known about the outcome of that particular thing. So if they would be helping, if they would be increasing their skills and how they would be more beneficial for them in discharging their assignments, and better performance will help them to attain certain incentives in the jobs, right? So they would be motivated enough to learn that particular program, right? Otherwise, if we are not telling them the outcome or what benefit they would be getting, so they might not be very much motivated in attending those sessions, right? Another important factor here is the self-concept. Self-concept refers with the understanding of one's own self, right? So if a person is, having that inclination, if they are ready to learn, okay, if they have this particular understanding that they actually have some understanding to learn those things, then only that learning will happen. So self-concept become, important aspect or important factor for learning, because if a person is having more clarity about their own self, if they are ready to learn from themselves, then the learning will become better. Learning style also plays a considerable impact on the process of learning, because we have different way of learning. So somehow it also depends upon the person or the trainer who make them the learn, right? So not everybody's teaching style or making learning style is same. So people have different way of training, different way of making people learn. So if you are making that learning style more of fun, more of involved kind of thing, then the learning will become more and more effective, right? If learning take place in a boring environment and you are just continuously repeating those things and people are not getting involved, so might be possible the learning will not be very effective. So learning style is also having a good is a very important factor in understanding whether the learning will be effective or not. And lastly, we have socio-cultural determinants, where we can say that there are several socio-cultural determinants also affects the process of learning. Our own religions, the society we belong to, the culture, right? They have a considerable impact on the process of learning, what we exactly want to learn and what we are not learning, right? So these are the factors which we have talked about, has a very important role in the process of learning, which needed to be taken care of. I hope all of you have understood what learning refers to and why are we talking about learning, because we know that learning brings a change in the behavior of an individual, and generally this change is of permanent nature, and we want our employees to behave in a certain manner. For that reason, we are working hard on making them learn what to do and what not to do. So in this regard, we have talked about the principles of learning, what are the important aspects which we needed to be taken care while making people learn, and what factors will affect the process of learning. So now we are going to move to the second part of this session, where we will be talking about the theories of learning, right. So these theories are of utmost importance. We need to understand what these theories talk about and how with the help of these theories we can make people learn things better. So in this regard, we have theories like classical conditioning theory is there, operant conditioning theory we will be discussing, we will talk about cognitive theory, social learning theory, and we have reinforcement theory. So let us have an understanding of this classical conditioning theory. This is one of the very old and the profound theory of learning which is been given by Ivan Pavlov, and this theory makes us understand how we can make people learn. So he was a Russian psychologist, and he has developed this classical conditioning theory, and this classical conditioning theory is basically a kind of an experiment which was conducted on a dog, right. So before we start with our discussion of this theory, let us have some understanding how this theory is going to work, right. So here we have 2-3 things which we need to understand. One is known as conditional stimulus, one is called as unconditional stimulus, then we have conditioned response, and we have unconditioned response. So these are the terms which we are going to use for the understanding of this theory. So let us understand what is unconditioned stimulus. Unconditioned stimulus is that stimulus which is going to be reflected naturally, right. It is not a learned kind of a stimulus which we are going to take. It is something which is a natural things which we have taken from the environment. Whereas unconditional response in this contrast is also a natural response, okay, where the learning has not yet happened. Whatever your reaction will be there, it is actually a natural response. That is what is called as unconditioned response. Condition means the learning has taken place. So before the learning, the stimulus which we are taking from the environment and the response on the stimulus which we are giving, they both are unconditioned. But when learning happens, then our stimulus will become conditioned and our response will also become conditioned. So conditioned stimulus is a stimulus that elicits a response, it naturally has no connection to it, right. And at the same time, conditioned response is response to the stimulus that does not occur naturally, but it occurs because of some learning. So now going back, if you look at this particular figure, you will be able to understand this classical conditioning theory given by Ivan Pavlov. He says that when conditional stimulus, right, where we will be calling it as a bell in this case based on this experiment, is attached with the unconditional stimulus, that is the food, we will be getting unconditional response, that is the process of salivation. Now let us learn this theory with these stages, right. So with this you will be able to understand the very first stage is called as before conditioning. So what has happened here, you can see this is the food given to the dog, and the very first reaction which you are seeing here when the food is being given to the dog, right. So here in the very first stage, this food is the unconditional stimulus, right, where we have not made this dog understand that what it is. It is the natural thing where with the smell of the food, the dog will be able to figure out what it is, right. So the response you are seeing here is the unconditioned response. As soon as dog has seen the food, right, the salivation process of the dog begins, right. So this is a natural thing which has happened where nothing has been learned, nothing has been taught. With the introduction of the food, the unconditioned response which comes out from the dog is the salivation. Now you can see again what is being done, a bell has been introduced here. Instead of food, now we are giving we have given the stimulus which is a neutral stimulus, right. That was the bell which was introduced, and the bell was the bell was ringed, right. So when the dog hear the voice of this bell, there was no response at all, because this dog is not associated what this bell means, right. What is the meaning of this bell, right. So here this bell is the neutral stimulus which has no meaning to it, and because of it there was no conditioned response, no salivation was there, right, because dog does not know how to respond to it, right. Food was there, salivation has started coming, right, because the dog knows that this is the food and he has a desire to eat it. But with the bell, because it is a neutral stimulus, there was no response. Now during the conditioning, what has happened? Now this is the process where the learning has been made. What is been done? The bell was ringed and then food was given, right. So gradually we are making the dog learn about this process of learning, right. So we are making him learn that as soon as the bell will ring, the food will be provided to him, right. So when the bell was ring, food was provided along with it, the salivation process started, right. So here this neutral stimulus, we are making him learn that what is the meaning of the bell, okay. So when the bell was ring, the food was provided, again you can see the unconditioned response, because still the learning process was going, but because the food is being provided along with the bell, so the response which we are seeing is the process of salivation started. And now in this stage, when the learning has taken place, you can see after the conditioning, as soon as the bell was ring, the process of salivation has started. Now you can see that this bell, which was the neutral stimulus in the previous stages, has become a conditional stimulus, because the learning has happened in the third step, where the dog has learned as soon as the bell will ring, the food will be provided. So now after this, we can see no food is been provided, only the bell was ring and the process of salivation has started. So this has become the conditional stimulus, and now the response which we are getting is also called as conditioned response. So what is being proved through this theory is that if we keep repeating the same thing again and again, because the dog has been made learn this thing by doing this again and again, they ring the bell and the food was given, they ring the bell and the food was given. So that makes the learning in the mind of the dog that as soon as the bell will ring, the food will be provided. Even if it is not being provided, the salivation process was started, right. So with this understanding of the conditioning theory, which is given by Pavlov, prove that if you would be repeating the same kind of behavior again and again, it will help people to learn in a certain manner. You can change the behavior of an individual. So that was a good initial understanding which is being given in the process of learning, that is done through the classical conditioning theory. Now in this regard, we have the another theory which is called as operant conditioning theory. Operant conditioning theory is given by B.F. Skinner, and he was an American psychologist, right. He also done an experiment to understand how to make people learn, right, how the learning takes place. So operant conditioning theory is relatively different from the classical conditioning theory. It is based on the consequences, right, what result you would be getting, whether your outcome of your action will be pleasant or the outcome of your action is unpleasant. Depending upon that, you would be repeating your behavior, right. If something you have done and some kind of a pleasant reward would be given to you, then you would learn that this should be repeated again and again. And if something where you have done something and some kind of an unpleasant thing is being given, you will learn that it should not be repeated. And this is what we learn, or this is what we do with everybody. You can see a small child who is doing certain things wrong, then what generally parents will do? They will scold this person, they will scold the child, or they might hit if something very wrong is being done by the child. So the child will learn in the early ages that this behavior is not acceptable, one should not do it, right. And if a child is doing something good, then we start appreciating this child and we will try to give something or the other, so that they will learn that this kind of a behavior is acceptable. So if you look at the experiment which is being done by B.F. Skinner, he did this experiment with the rat, right. And what he did, he created a spinner box, right. This box is called as a spinner box, which you can see here, and this is being made to understand this process of learning, which we called as operant conditioning theory. There was a rat which was kept under this box, and there was an electric grid which was attached to this box, right. And there was a there was a point which creates a shock in the generator. Then there is a food cup, there is a food dispenser, pallet was there, speaker was there in the box which create a noise. There were signals and there was lever also. So what has been done, The rat was kept inside the box, and now it has been observed based on the behavior of this rat, what is the outcome of this behavior, what learning will take place. So, you can see there were two lights, one was blue and one was red light. Okay. So, when as and when the rat presses the lever, left side of the lever, then the electric shock was given in the box based on this electric grid. When the rat press the right side of the lever, then the food pallet will dispose of the food and he would be receiving the food, right. So, what is being told through this experiment, with this repeated nature of the experiment which is being done by 1 or 2 time done, so the rat has learned that he should not be pressing the left side of the lever, because he has learned that if he would be doing that, there will be an electric shock he would be getting, right. But if he will be pressing the right side, then he would be getting the food, right. So, this is what we are trying to understand here with this theory, that learning happens with the rewards, or with the outcomes of that particular things, right. If something negative we are getting, then we stop doing that behavior, and if some pleasant things we are getting, then we keep doing that particular kind of a behavior. That is what is being given by B.F. Skinner, and this experiment was done in a spinning box. So, now if you look at the difference between the theories given by Ivan Pavlov and B.F. Skinner, the basic idea is to have organism associate with the event, whereas the Skinner says that organism associates behavior and resulting events. That means that whatever we are doing, we need to understand what kind of an outcome we would be getting for our behavior, and based on those results our behavior will be learned, right. If you look at the response in classical conditioning, the response was involuntary and automatic, right. It was an automatic response, we are not creating any kind of voluntarily aspect to it. Involuntarily dog has seen the food and automatically the process of salvation comes out, whereas here in this case the response becomes voluntary, because the learning has been taken place that pressing the left side of the lever will give the electric shock and pressing the right side of the lever will give the food, right. So, here the response was based on the environment or the reward which has been given to that. If you talk about the acquisition, associating events, NS is the paired with the US, that is neutral stimulus is paired with the unconditioned stimulus, that becomes the conditional stimulus in case of the classical conditioning theory, whereas in operant conditioning theory, associating response with the consequences, that is on the base of reinforcer or a punisher, whether we are going to repeat this or not. If you talk about extinction, conditioned response decreases when conditional stimulus is repeatedly presented alone, right. If you only ring the bell and the food is not going to be provided, if it is also being done on a regular basis, then conditioned response will also decrease, the salvation process will stop going, right. So, it is not that if you have made somebody learn something, it keeps on going forever, right. If you would stop doing such kind of things, that learning will also go, that learning will also stop. Here responding decreases when reinforcement stop. Again, if you can see in this kind of an experiment, if left side of a lever will not give any kind of an electric shock, then definitely the rat will also be pressing the left side as well as the right side. If you look at the spontaneous recovery of these two experiments, the reappearance after the resting period of an extinguish, that was the conditioned response, whereas here the reappearance was after the resting period, right. So, there is a difference in both the theory. Here the stimulus was first and then the response was there, whereas in the operant conditioning theory, the response was first and then the stimulus comes into the picture, right. So, generalization, if you look at both the theories, the tendency to respond to the stimulus rather than the conditioned stimulus, whereas here the organ's response to similar stimulus is also called as reinforced. And if you look at the discrimination between these two theories, then the learning ability to distinguish between conditioned stimulus and other stimulus that does not signal to the unconditional stimulus, whereas organisms learn that certain responses but not other will be reinforced. So, both the theories have made us understanding that learning can happen based on the things which are being done on a repetitive basis. We can make people learn, and second theory says that based on the reward and based on the reinforcement, you can make people learn whether the behavior should be repeated or not. Now, coming to the another aspect of the theory where we have cognitive learning theory. This theory is given by Tolman. Now, this theory is based on the cognitive aspect of an individual, right. So, this theory was basically conducted on rat itself, and what is being done by the Tolman has created a puzzle, right. So, maze was put into that puzzle and the food was kept at the end of that puzzle, right. So, now Tolman was observing no clues, nothing was being given to that particular maze, and he was just kept into that puzzle, and he has to find out his own way to reaching out up to the food where he was able to smell it as per on the basis of the smell which he would be getting, he has to figure out his own way, right. So, cognitive learning theory that it is based on the human behavior cognitive model, and it is used in number of psychological process like perception, right, learning. It is also being used in the formation of attitude as well as motivation. So, here it refers to the ideas, it refers to the thoughts, it refers to the knowledge and interpretation and understanding about himself and his environment, right. So, cognitive theory is based on our own thinking, our own knowledge about the things, what kind of things we are understanding, what kind of a perception we are keeping for the things, what ideas we are having in our mind. With that we are learning things, and definitely amongst all this cognitive learning theory is a very important theory which is given by Tolman, because here we are putting our own understanding to the situations and accordingly we are learning. So, if you look at this cognitive learning theory, here one stimulus will lead to the another stimulus. In the classical conditioning theory, stimulus was related to the response, whereas in operant conditioning theory there was response and then the stimulus was there. But if you look at the Tolman theory given for a cognitive learning theory, here one stimulus lead to the another stimulus, which makes it different from the previous two theory. So, learning consists of relationship between the cognitive environment, that are the clues, and the expectations, and the behavior is goal oriented, right. If we are looking forward to have what is the goal, ultimately where we want to reach, we will definitely find some or the other way to reach out to it. Like the example which I have given you, a girl wanted to become a badminton player, though there was no much support which was given by the family members, no such official education has been taken up in that particular field, because it was her own interest, she wanted to reach out to her goal. So, she finded her own way in learning how to play badminton, how to keep out the things which are required for playing badminton. So, it is always a goal of an individual which gives them the understanding, their ideas, their knowledge, right, how to figure out their way, where one stimulus leads to the another stimulus, and ultimately we will reach out to our desired goal. Now, in this regard, the another theory is called as social learning theory. Social learning theory is very important, and that is why we say that it is very important for an individual to interact, right. Social learning theory takes place anytime, anywhere, because this theory is based on interaction with the people, right. So, whenever we are interacting and talking to anybody, learning takes place, something or the other we are learning, we are observing, we are listening to the other people. So, we all are learning from each other. So, according to this, the person observes how other act and then acquire a mental picture of that act, and the consequences of it could be reward or punishment. So, you can understand this particular theory, suppose in a class, right, where 60 students are sitting and one of the student came late to the class and teacher does not allow that students to enter into the class, right. So, it is not only the learning to that particular individual who came late, but it is also the learning to the rest 59 students who are sitting in the class, that if we would be coming late to the class, then we would not be allowed to attend it, right. So, learning is not only happening when we are being taught to those things, we can learn what is happening in the environment, how people are responding to it, whether we should be doing it or not. And there is also an important saying, life is not so big that we would make all the mistakes to learn them. We should always learn from other mistake, what is to be done and what not to be done. So the person act out the acquired image, and if the consequences are positive, he will tend to do it again, and if the consequences are negative, the person will not do it again. That is again related with the operant conditioning theory, where we are relating this social learning theory, and we are saying that by observing things and by creating that image in our mind, if some positive results are being given to it, then we tend to behave in a certain manner, but if some negative consequences are being attached, then we stop doing that particular thing. Now coming to the another theory, which is called as reinforcement theory. This is again important for our understanding that reinforcement theory means forcing somebody, right, where we are defining it as increase the strength of a response, right. If you are increasing the intensity of the response, that tends to induce repetition of the behavior that preceded the reinforcement. Okay. So reinforcement theory is all about making people learn whether this kind of a behavior should be acceptable or not in the organization. So there are 4 ways through which we would be doing this reinforcement theory. The very first is called as positive reinforcement, then we have negative reinforcement, punishment as well as extinction. So let us talk about the positive reinforcement. So positive reinforcement is when you are attaching some positive regard to it, right. If some positive results are being given to some kind of a behavior or an act, then the person will respond person will learn that this kind of a behavior needs to be repeated. So this is the method which is desirable, which is a desirable behavior and is reinforced with a positive outcome. If in an organization you see certain set of individuals are putting their innovative thoughts and bringing lot of creativity, and they are also helping the organization to grow further by taking their own actions, right, not waiting or by acting in a proactive manner, right. So the management is also always looking forward to have such kind of proactive behavior from the employees side, so that they should not be told what is to be done, they should already understand that these are the things which should be implemented, right. So when an employee exhibit a behavior which is desirable, that a manager or a company wants them to behave, and this behavior needs to be repeated, then it is ensured by the manager that company is also associating this behavior with some kind of a reward, some kind of a positive reinforcement should be given, then only we can expect the person to repeat it, and others who are observing will also learn the same thing. Like for example, if an employee achieves the sales target, then in this case achieving the sales target is a desirable behavior, right. Management wants their employees to achieve the targets which are being given. So if you want every person or every employee to achieve their sales target, then you should be giving certain sort of appreciation and increment to those individuals, so that they would be repeating this behavior in future as well. Then we have negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is basically given when you does not want any particular behavior of an individual to be repeated again, right. It goes opposite to the positive reinforcement, and this is also a method of reinforcing desirable behavior. In this case also, when an employee exhibit a desirable behavior, then its result is a consequence which is liked by employee, that is why it is called as reinforcement. So here you need to understand that positive and negative reinforcement are the aspects where we want a certain behavior to be repeated again and again, right. Like the way we have discussed about the motivation, motivation could be positive, motivation can be negative. So depending upon the people, right, what sort of people we are dealing with, we use these 2 different aspects of motivation, right. If a person belongs to the theory Y, then the positive motivation works. When a person belongs to theory X, then negative sort of motivation work. Likewise, in the case of reinforcement, positive and negative things can be used to reinforce that particular behavior of an individual. Like previously we have understood, if a employee is able to reach out their sales target, then they should be given some kind of an increment or promotions in their job, so that we can expect this behavior to be repeated again. Whereas if you look at the negative reinforcement, this is slightly different from the positive reinforcement. In positive reinforcement, we are giving something which he likes, for example the rewards, the incentive, the promotion, the praise, right. But in case of negative reinforcement, something with the employee dislike is taken away as a result of his desirable behavior, right. So, for understanding of this, you can take this example. Suppose an employee was been told to be transferred to a certain place, right. So, if a person is not liking to take that transfer, or the place where the transfer is being made is not very good for his himself or his family, or maybe for his children's education. So, if a person is reaching out his targets, right, and if he is performing well in the organization and this kind of transfer has been taken up from this employee, then he feel good about it, right. So, he will be happy that this kind of transfer has been stopped which he was not liking. So, the difference between positive and negative reinforcement is that only in positive reinforcement we are giving those things which they are liking, and in negative reinforcement we are taking those things which they are not liking, and in both the cases we are looking forward to have the repetition of their behavior. Following the response with something pleasant is called positive reinforcement, while following the response with the withdrawal of something unpleasant is called as negative reinforcement. If an employee achieves a sale target as a result of his transfer to the different location, if it is withdrawn, then also an employee feel happy and is quite likely to repeat this behavior for achieving the sales target. The example which we have discussed just now. Now, coming to the another aspect, they are called as punishment and extinction. These are the aspects of stopping the behavior of an individual which we do not want them to be repeated, right. In the reinforcement, we have talked about positive and negative reinforcement where we want this behavior to be repeated, whereas in punishment and extinction we want this behavior not to be repeated. So, punishment is well understood by all of us, that if a person is doing something which is not which is not in the favor of the organization, or which is not in the channel which is to be done, which is unpleasant, right, which is an unpleasant consequences, right. So, here you can give some sort of a punishment to the individual to make them learn that this kind of a behavior is not going to be accepted. So, in this case, when a person exhibits a behavior which is undesirable and a manager would like to stop that behavior, then behavior should result in something which employees dislike, right. You should be giving certain things to that employee which he or she is not liking, like you would be scolding them, right. You would be giving them low performance rating, you can give a negative note on it, right. You can also fine them, you can also file their personal file, you can note down a paper in their personal file that this kind of a misconduct has been done by an employee, or you can even go up to the demotion, right. So, these are some example of punishment which are being given for the work which is not desirable, and we do not want that behavior to be repeated in the organization. So, when such behavior in unpleasant consequences, then probability of repeating such behavior would decrease, and we will ensure that such kind of behavior will not be repeated. Whereas, in case of extension, what happens, it is also the same thing where we does not want this behavior to be repeated, but we are not associating this thing with any kind of punishment, rather we are stop giving the benefits for those things, and gradually people will learn that by doing so, if the management is not responding in any way, then this kind of behavior will also go down in future. So, extinction is also a method of stopping a behavior, and in this case when the employee exhibit any kind of an undesirable behavior, the manager withdraw the pleasant consequences, right. So, whatever good things which were done earlier, now they are not going to be provided to those things, because this kind of a behavior they want to stop. Like for example, if an employee achieves the sales target, then the manager ignores it or take away the attention which was given for such result, right. So, employee was thinking he was able to achieve the sales target and the management will praise him, the management will increase his salary or some increment or promotions will be given to him, but now you see this person is not getting any kind of a response, he is not getting any positive things from the manager's point of view. So, gradually this individual will learn that doing such is not going to get any kind of a benefit. So, this person will stop repeating this behavior and slowly he would not be behaving in the manner which is not going to give any kind of a result. So, employee does not get any reward, appreciation, increment for his achievement. So, this method decreases the probability of getting such behavior repeated. So, this is a kind, you can say, a silent way of taking out certain benefits where you have given it earlier, but now you do not want these things to be continued or such behavior you are not looking forward in future, then you can gradually taking out those pleasant aspect of that particular job. And when behavior results in the withdrawal of the present things for a quite number of times, then surely that behavior is extinct or is not repeated, right. So, maybe this take a longer time to stop that behavior because it is not very clear what are the expectations of the management, right, because in case of a punishment you are actually getting the result, right, and you understand it very clearly that this behavior needs not to be repeated. But in case of extension it takes a little more time to understand whether to repeat this behavior or not, but if this happens continuously for a longer period of time, then after some time this behavior will be stopped. So, if you look at the summary of today's session, in this session we have got the learning of learning, right. We have talked about learning in particular because we know learning changes the behavior of an individual, and all we are talking here is to have a right behavior of our employees in the organization. So, by the process of learning we have tried to understand how we can bring relatively change in the behavior of the individuals. Here in this session we have talked about the basic nature of learning which brings the change in the behavior of individual by giving some meaningful aspects to of it. We have talked about the principles of learning. There are 7 principles which make learning more and more effective. Thereafter, we have discussed about the factors which affects the learning like intelligence level of the people, their goals, their interests, their self-concept, motivation given to them as well as the learning style. And after this, we have discussed about the theories which are given in this regard to make things learn better. The very first theory which we have talked about is the classical conditioning theory given by Ivan Pavlov. Thereafter, we have discussed the B.F. Skinner theory, that is operant conditioning theory, how the things are being made learned based on the outcome of any behavior, right. Thereafter, we have talked about the social learning theory with the social interaction by observing people from the things which are happening near to us. We usually try to understand what is right and what is acceptable, what kind of behavior we should reflect. Thereafter, we have also talked about the cognitive theory of learning which is given by Tolman. This is again a very important theory based on the stimulus leading to the another stimulus will make us learn about the thing based on our feelings, based on our experience, ideas, knowledge, right. We reach out to the ultimate goal. And finally, we have talked about the reinforcement theory. Reinforcement theory categorizes into positive and negative reinforcement. In both the cases, we want this behavior to be repeated, but in positive reinforcement, we give them what they like, and in negative reinforcement, we take those things which they dislike. Whereas punishment and extensions are the methods of stopping one's behavior which is not acceptable in the organization. I hope all of you have understood the process of learning and the aspect which we have discussed in today's session. These are some references of today's session from which I have been taken up, and I hope you have learned and enjoyed the session. Thank you very much.